Tony D and Little Joan with a screenwriter's rant on, by request, She-Hulk again. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books, links in the description. Comedy Horror in South Jersey. It's The Pineys, books 1 through 9, available at Amazon.com. This is a video by, what's her name? Oh wow, she really does some good technical stuff. Fictional Darling, her name is, and I'm not here to pick on her. Somebody asked me to respond to this video, and I have to be honest. This is about as far as I could get into it. About 6.5 minutes before I'm just like, one of my commenters is defending She-Hulk and asked me to look at this. And look, I get it. But there's this idea, and again, this is propagated, I think, by PR firms in Los Angeles, that the only reason people don't like the She-Hulk is because there's a bunch of trolls online, and they're a bunch of salty incels that need to be addressed. Now, I'm not saying she thinks that. She's just defending the show, and she admits right here it's just her personal opinion and interpretation. And again, I'm not picking on her. But the thing is, I think she's bought into that narrative to some degree. She doesn't understand why there's such anger. She perceives it as anger. Let me paint you this scenario. Andrew Tate. You know Andrew Tate, right? The guy who just got kicked off of YouTube for being, I don't know, misogynist, I guess. Let's say tomorrow he bought Cosmopolitan magazine. And instead of skinny models and shoes on the cover of Cosmopolitan, he started putting busty bikini models holding beers and standing in front of race cars. And then the articles in it, instead of being about, fashion and shoes, which would still kind of be in there, oh man, it would be double D models, barely wearing anything, sandwiched in between articles about how to brew your own beer, how to be a bro, and cars, football, all that stuff, right? Do you think the fan base currently established at Cosmo might have something to say about that? I'm pretty sure every woman who's ever read Cosmo would be on the internet going, what the hell is this? And saying, this isn't Cosmo. And they'd be right to say it. They'd be absolutely right to say it. And they would demand to know why. And the answer would be, well, some men read Cosmo. So we thought we would get more of the male demo in our magazine. What's wrong? Are you a bunch of misandrist incels who just hate men? I mean, that's essentially what the entire MCU is. The Marvel Comics universe, again, my personal opinion, but it's true, backed up with data, was built by a mostly male audience. Again, that doesn't mean there's not fangirls in there. She's probably a fangirl. Maybe she could recite the She-Hulk lore better than me in the comics. I don't know. But the bottom line is, even the most generous percentages of demo say that at least 2/3 of the audience are men. Even now, even after relentlessly pushing women into the MCU and feminist ideas in an attempt to attract women somehow. I don't know how that attracts women. It's still the majority of men. Still in comics. Still probably in the MCU. Although there's not any real data in that I'm aware of. So, but you have to understand, the MCU was taking this male-dominated thing, turning it into TV shows and movies. And at first, we were all on board. All the men were on board. All the audience was on board because phase one was pretty fantastic. Yeah, we had some problems with Thor 2 and a couple of other minor things, but overall, solid. All the way mostly up till Endgame, pretty solid. You know, there was Captain Marvel, and we started to see the cracks, but, you know, this comic was never aimed at women. Not really. You could argue some women read She-Hulk. I'm sure some of them did, just like some women read Thor or Captain America or Iron Man or Spider-Man. But it was no different than any other comic. In fact, it probably skewed more towards men because Jen Walters was smoking hot and John Byrne would draw her that way. Would draw her in skimpy outfits, hulking out. Because there's a sub-genre, as I've said before, of giant women comics that Marvel was quietly capitalizing on. Now, the She-Hulk TV show. I have not seen it on Disney Plus, but I've seen many clips. Enough clips that I think I've seen the majority of the show. Now, you could argue, you haven't seen the show in context. Okay, that's an argument. But I am a screenwriter, and I've written this stuff a million times, including sitcoms. The problem with the sitcom of the She-Hulk is it doesn't start like a sitcom. Sitcoms should start at the status quo. It shouldn't be this explanation of how she became the She-Hulk. Oh, and yeah, here's the status quo. No. What we should have started with in She-Hulk, and I've thought about this some more, thanks to this request, is we should have started with Jen already as the She-Hulk. She's been the She-Hulk for a few years. What happened to get her to the She-Hulk? You could have kept the origin story. You could have just casually mentioned it. But because Jen's character doesn't want to be a superhero, she hasn't really transformed since the accident. A couple of times, maybe to help people quietly, because she's a lawyer and she doesn't want to get caught up in any legal proceedings, quietly changes into the Hulk, quietly fights some crime and then disappears, blaming it on Bruce, letting Bruce take all the credit. Now, how empowering would that have been if that was the opening of the show? Jen's been the She-Hulk for 5 years. Nobody knows about it except, of course, Bruce, who she quietly defends behind the scenes, using her law abilities mostly, but a couple of times as She-Hulk. But then an event in the first episode causes her to have to reveal herself. And you could have included the Hulk in it, right? You could have included Bruce hulking out, losing control, and Jen has to go in there to talk him down because, I don't know, the Avengers are unavailable or whatever Marvel universe thing you could come up with. She runs in, takes care of everything, tries to keep it on the down low, but this time she gets exposed. And now everybody knows she's the She-Hulk. And she has to deal with that. Would have been a great episode. Would have been a very empowering episode for Jen because she would have already been in control. We wouldn't have had this argument with the fans over her origin, which you've changed and completely glossed over. And again, this gloss over, I'm not really blaming her. She's trying to defend something that it's subjective. Art is subjective. You can like the She-Hulk. I don't care. You want to like Disney Plus and waste your money? Okay. Can't stop you. I'm a libertarian. I think you should be able to take heroin while you're doing it. But I wouldn't advise it. The heroin or Disney Plus. So, what this is a breakdown of the show based on how she interprets various things. But it's funny how she interprets it because she's trying to give you almost a psychological breakdown of some of the stuff. And one of the most interesting things she says in just the 6.5 minutes that I watched was the scene where Jen says, anger and fear, that's the baseline of any woman. And a lot of people called that out as like, geez, what the hell, man? She calls it out as, oh yeah, that's true. Now, maybe that's true for her. And which I think is interesting because it's like, that's your baseline of emotion? I think everybody has a lot of anger and fear. But I think what the show implies with that line is that everybody is a boiling cauldron of anger and fear. And if they got superpowers, oh boy, then they'd be hulking out everywhere. That was not Jen's character in the comic at all. Jen, the implication was Jen Walters could control her transformation because hulking out is not a thing. It's not a standard thing. The Hulk did it, but that was Bruce. Bruce is messed up for various reasons they've established now in the MCU. Although that wasn't early on, that was later. That was retcon stuff. Really, the Hulk was Frankenstein as a superhero. Because he was very much Frankenstein. You look at the old original Hulk sketches, artwork, it looks like Frankenstein. So I think that was kind of the pitch. It was Frankenstein as a superhero. And the retcon is, oh, he's had so much trauma in his life and terrible things happened in the comic. That's fine, whatever. They built upon what was established on the Hulk early on to explain his mental state. But Jen doesn't have that mental state, and that's very clear, even in the MCU. So the problem with baseline for any woman is they keep implying in the episode this isn't about Jen Walters as an individual and Bruce Banner as an individual becoming Hulks. This is what men and women would be like if they became Hulks. And that implication is stupid and collectivist. It's a dumb statement. And it really undermines their character, which is another reason people keep criticizing this show and kind of don't like it. Because Jen Walters, and I call, you see that I don't call her She-Hulk, and I don't even call her by the actress's name. I'm calling her Jen Walters because I know her character. Her character was a pretty good person. A person that had their head screwed on straight. That was one of the reasons we liked Jen. We didn't call her She-Hulk. We'd call Hulk Hulk because we liked Hulk better than Bruce Banner. We called She-Hulk Jen because she was always Jen even when she was the Hulk. And that was the interesting thing about her. She was a normal woman, but she was a superhero, a reluctant superhero. And she dealt with normal, everyday things as a superhero. The problem with the She-Hulk TV series is it's trying to jam in the MCU and trying to be a sitcom. Sitcom needs normalcy for its comedy. And they're trying to jam in way too many things, including feminism. Feminism just has no place in the She-Hulk. What you could have stated in the She-Hulk, simply by having Jen be competent, is that women can be very competent superheroes and attorneys at law at the same time, which would have been a great statement. Instead, we have this controversy, and again, I don't care about the controversy, that, that Jen is not this way. She's just not. This is a male-dominated medium, superhero comics. There was no need to alienate the male audience, and that's what has been relentlessly pursued, in my view, at the MCU and at Marvel Comics now. You look at what they did to the X-Men. Oh, what's the big crossover? Oh, it's going to be a party, and everybody wears a different costume. Oh, guys love that. Yeah, that was woke tarded. And twice they did it so far. So they turned the X-Men into a communist collective that kidnaps children and dictates um, policy from on high, whilst blurring the line between heroes and villains. I mean, they've absolutely screwed up the X-Men. I pray to God they don't try to do that in the movies, because man, that is not going to go over well. But getting back to She-Hulk, she's picking through the things here and starting with parts of the episode I didn't see, so she transferred some of them. I'm seeing more and more of the episode as I keep doing these. And her point is, well, she asked Bruce for help because Bruce is the one that knows. Yeah, that's a fact the writers couldn't get around. Although, if they had done it my way, they kind of would have. But I just don't think they're that good writers. They're terrible. You don't have You shouldn't have characters announcing things. You shouldn't have characters telling you the way it is. You show it the way it is. If you want Jen to be a competent character, you just show her to be a competent character. And you're a lot more subtle than throwing rocks and Jen throws the rock a little further. That was a dumb scene too, and I've seen that too many times. It's the problem with all this too. The problem with this analysis, in my view too, is she's saying, "See, she asked Bruce for help, and Bruce is training her to be a Hulk." First off, that's not a thing. Okay, it's not a thing to be trained as the Hulk, because he's the only Hulk, she's the only other Hulk, and you already established that it's all built on emotion anyway. So you've got Bruce running around with this binder, flipping through it all the time to make him look smart, I guess. Oh, I've got glasses and a binder. What's in that binder? Oh, don't get too angry. Page 2. Really, don't get too angry. I mean, what the hell's going to be in that binder? Nothing. There's nothing he could tell her other than, you got to control your anger. You can't let loose and smack somebody across the face, because you'll cleave their head off and send it flying. And Jen states right in the episode, "Oh, so I'm better than you." Look, that's not a funny line. It's just not funny. It's stupid. It's very telling of the writers. And if you're going to tell me that's a line that women can relate to, then I think this show is for you. But, fictional darling. But that is very telling of the kind of audience they're trying to cultivate. Narcissist, I guess. I'm better than you. Women are better than you. That's the implication. And why would you do that? Why would you alienate part of your audience? Now imagine the line is different, okay? Imagine the total opposite happens. There's a scene in the lab, and Jen says, well, you know, why are you so much stronger than me? And Bruce says, well, I'm just better than you. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Oh yeah, there would have been protest in the street from the fangirls. Misogyny! It's a double standard. And that's part of the problem too. So some of the people pissed off about this episode are just men who are sick of being criticized at every turn over stuff they had nothing to do with. This is a show where the audience was built up by men. The stories were built up by mostly men. And now women are taking control and showing how they can do it better. Except they're not. And now they're making excuse after excuse. Is it an indication that a lot of women don't like to take responsibilities for their actions? Because I've seen men fail at television shows before, and usually their response is, well, not usually, but sometimes their response is, we're going to try to make the show better. Not, everybody's against me. So, and the other problem with this, oh, well, Jen asked Bruce, therefore she's not totally, bossing him around. By the end of the episode, she's showing him up. By the end of the episode, she's screaming at him saying, I can control my anger better than you. Ironically, sounded pretty pissed off. And is that even true? Jen's character in the show is just not good. Because in the comic, Jen was in control almost from the beginning. Jen never really lost her temper all that much. It wasn't until much later they started doing that stuff with Jen. For Jen, it was like she was very supportive of her cousin. And that could have been a way to bring Jen in. You could have already established her as the She-Hulk. Now, if you had to do an origin episode, in a half hour, I guess you could have did it in flashback, and that would have saved you a lot of problems. But I can hear the writers' meeting in this. They're using the Bechdel test. They don't want Bruce to get up on her, so to speak. They don't want Bruce to be better than her. And at every turn, Bruce is shown up by her. Bruce is like, well, I guess you're right, Jen. I mean, she runs into him with a Jeep. It's the pattern that's been again and again and again with the MCU. Humiliate the men. Because, and this started in comic imprints like Vertigo. Vertigo did the same thing. So they had launched Swamp Thing, which was became a horror comic, became very popular. I think they had already launched Hellblazer and Sandman. And then they got this idea to do an imprint called Vertigo, which would be aimed at mostly college kids, and it had more of a female audience. So the moment they did that, the editors really went whole hog, and every comic became sort of this man-hating thing, much like the MCU. So I'll give you an example. One of their comics at the time was Transmetropolitan. Transmet was part of the sci-fi imprint DC launched. I think it was about 6 titles. And Transmet was the most popular one. I think there was one other popular one that hung on for a little while, but they rolled Transmetropolitan into Vertigo. The moment they did, it changed. Before Transmet was rolled into Vertigo, it was basically Hunter S. Thompson in the future, and he had a couple of different side characters who were women. One of them was his assistant editor, who smoked and was kind of miserable. The other was a stripper character who was in one of the issues. And the premise of the character was she was in love with this guy who obviously wasn't in love with her. And he did all sorts of terrible things and was just, everybody was trying to tell her, but she couldn't let him go. Until finally he had himself, again, this is in the future, he had himself turned into nanites somehow, so he'd be immortal forever. And so they set him loose in the nanite world, and she asked, well, what's happening? He's interacting with the other nanites. He's having sex with one of the females who we uploaded earlier, and she runs out of the room crying, and finally she realizes the guy doesn't love her anymore. And it was a great character because she was a stripper, so she was hot, and she was one of the interesting characters that the Transmetropolitan character Spider Jerusalem encountered, and she had this blind spot because she was in love, and everybody can relate to that. So at the end of the issue, she runs away. So now they restart Transmetropolitan and Vertigo. They don't really restart it. They continue it. Immediately the tone changes. His assistant, who smokes and is miserable, is now getting tons of lines. The stripper comes back. Oh, but this time she's an empowered woman and becomes his bodyguard. Out of the blue. Out of the blue. Nothing really established other than she was a stripper who was in love with this guy who didn't love her back. Completely 180 on the character. Why? Because, in my view, they wanted two empowered women to balance out Hunter S. Thompson, who was running amok and having a good time. And then immediately, the fun meter went right down to zero. All the Vertigo books became dull and dreary. Now, some of them were still very good. I mean, Swamp Thing was already, it was a horror comic, so it was kind of dreary. Same thing with Hellblazer. But every once in a while, they would have a comedic issue. Like when Hellblazer and Swamp Thing got together along with a bunch of the other characters, and Swamp Thing used his powers to grow pot so everybody could get high. That was kind of fun. But the Vertigo imprint overall became dreary, relentlessly attacking white men, cis heteronormatives, and religion, relentlessly. Anybody who was a white male was evil, rich, fat, aggressive. The women, though, they were great. And so, it became a cesspool of progressivism, I guess you would say. That's kind of what they're doing to the MCU, albeit much slower. With Vertigo, they were much more quick about it, and in their defense, that was aimed at college kids, so that worked for their audience. It doesn't work for the MCU. MCU is supposed to be fun, light. Is it fun and light to talk about how you're constantly worried about being murdered every day, and that's why you need to control your anger? Even in the scene where she's approached by men and hulks out, it didn't really work. Everyone I've seen who talked about that scene says the same thing, and I agree. Those guys weren't all that aggressive. I mean, they could have been. That was the one scene where you expected it. That's the one scene you expected one of the characters to say, "Hey, honey, get over here. I'm going to show you a good time." Or something. But that didn't happen. It was like, kind of there. And that's kind of setting the bar low. On top of the fact that the scene right before, she shows up in a bar all disheveled, doesn't remember what happened to her, and a group of women, instead of calling the police, assuming she's been attacked by somebody, give her a makeover and send her on her way alone. So, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. The show just doesn't make any sense on its surface, and it's certainly not. You have characters, even if you remove all the Hulk stuff, you have characters who aren't doing normal human being things. There was a great live stream with Star Wars girl, and Chrissy Mayer, a couple other women. I think it was, I want to say it's the Nerdrotic stream or the Yellow Flash stream. I don't remember. But it was mostly women. And they all said universally, yeah, why would they set her out by herself? If she's just been attacked, A, they should have called the police, and B, they shouldn't have left her alone until she was safe at home with her roommate or friend or whatever. Which is that was my reaction just seeing the clip. Like, it seems odd that she's by herself. Did she get into an argument with those women? Because I didn't see the whole episode. This is the problem with She-Hulk. This is the problem with people who can't write. And from what I know of the Marvel comics, and I imagine they adopted kind of this strategy in the TV show as well, they keep recruiting people who have never written this stuff before. So they don't know what they're doing. It's like when they recruited that guy to write, he wrote for the Atlantic, and he created the New Warriors, and it was absolutely awful, and he got ratioed so bad for the trailer, they've never released the comic. Oh, I want to see that comic released. It'll be a hilarious day. But the point is, She-Hulk, you can defend it all you want. There's no logic to defending it. You just like it. That's fine. You can like the show. You can like terrible things if you want. I mean, people like all sorts of terrible things that I don't like. I don't care. But, understand that if you're trying to defend it from a point of either the audience who hates it doesn't know what they're talking about, I think that's wrong. We do know what we're talking about because we were fans of the comic. Now, my commenter says he's been reading She-Hulk since the 80s. There's also the danger that you have your blinders on, I suggested, because you love the character so much you want the show to be good because this is the first She-Hulk show ever. And I could see that too. I was that way with a few different IPs, you'll say. I was that way with, I love the Banana Splits. That's how old I am. I love the Banana Splits. If they did a show that was even in the ballpark of the Banana Splits the way it used to be, I would love it. I would watch it. A cartoon show hosted by guys in mascot uniforms? Hooray! But they came out with a horror movie based on the characters as animatronic puppets, and I lost my damn mind. But my point is, you can like terrible things, or that things that other people think are terrible. That's freedom. That's art as a subjective thing. But objectively, She-Hulk was an IP built by a male demo audience. And inserting feminism into it, and it's clear that they did that, it's extremely feminist, is a bad move. It would be a bad move even if that was aimed at women, because feminism is political and it divides people. Even if you insert good, quote-unquote, politics into a TV show, especially a sitcom that's supposed to be light and funny, and understand, comedy is supposed to go after everybody. It should have made fun of everybody. It shouldn't just make fun of superheroes outside of Jen. It should make fun of Jen too, and her situation as a woman. I've seen a lot of clips from the show. I haven't really seen a funny clip that makes fun of Jen at Jen's expense, right? That maybe Jen is too arrogant, or Jen is a little too girly, or Jen is a little being too much of a lawyer, or whatever. What we see is Jen is great. Jen is great. Everybody's great. Oh, She-Hulk's great. Oh, honey, you've got a great butt. Great. And that is, again, it speaks to, I think, these women who got in the writer's room and said, oh, we finally got something. We finally got She-Hulk. We're going to do everything. We're going to make it everything to everyone, and feminism will rule the world. Too anxious, ladies. You had your first shot, I guess, at a truly feminist superhero TV show, and instead you turned it into, I don't know what this is. But it's supposed to be light and funny. It's not supposed to be divisive. It's not supposed to start arguments on the internet. You know what doesn't start arguments on the internet? The Pickle Rick episode. Because that S is funny. And written by the same woman who produces this show. Right? She's the producer, I think. Director. I don't know. Showrunner. Who knows what the titles are now. So, I can't talk about She-Hulk anymore. I really don't want to. But people keep asking me about it. Look, I think She-Hulk sucks. I think Disney Plus sucks. I'm not going to pay Disney Plus to see the whole episode. I don't care what you say. I'm not interested. I hear the second episode's better. Maybe it is. I don't care. I'm not going to watch it. If there's some circumstances why I could watch it for free, probably still wouldn't watch it because I don't want to waste my time. I'm still trying to watch The Terminal List with Chris Pratt. That sounds like a good show, and I watched the first 3 episodes, and it's been pretty good so far. So what the hell do I need to waste my time with She-Hulk and Disney Plus? I want comedy, and I got a pretty high bar. Again, if you want to start a sitcom based on the She-Hulk, it should have started with status quo right out the gate. Right out the gate. Sitcoms usually have 3 sets, you know. So there's no excuse for this show let me say this too. There's absolutely no excuse for this show being this bad. Because it's different. If this was produced by a bunch of fans, I would have a completely different take on this. If this was a fan-produced thing, I'd be like, wow, this is pretty impressive. But it wasn't. It was produced by the biggest media company, in the world. And people have complaints at almost every level. The CGI. People complain about that. The story, the dialogue, the laughs, the transfer from a comic book. I mean, there's all sorts of problems in this show. How do you have so many problems in a show with a virtually unlimited budget? All the access in the world. They have access to Mark Ruffalo, a movie star. Tatiana Maslany, who was the star of Orphan Black, that went at least 5 seasons, who's clearly a good actress. They have all the money in the world. How do you make something this bad with that kind of money? So you have no excuses for making something this bad. One of the things she says in here, which a lot of YouTubers say, is you got to give the show a chance. This was just the first episode or second episode or whatever. The show's got to develop. No. Not when you have the kind of money Disney has. No. Disney's been doing the MCU for 10 years. You can't come out the gate one time with a good TV show where the character's fully developed. Yeah, you can. You absolutely can. If you had followed the comic, you would have done that. If you had followed the comic exactly, character fully developed. But they didn't do that. Oh no. We're better than that. We're Hollywood. We're gonna do it. Oh, and then when you call them out on it, oh, well, we needed it to develop over several episodes. I don't need to see your practice sessions. Okay? When I'm watching TV, when I'm watching entertainment, I don't want to see the practice sessions. When I'm watching the terminal list, I don't say, well, I gotta give Chris Pratt, he got some of the lines wrong and accidentally called people by his wrong names. There's no excuse for that when you got millions and millions of dollars. Okay? Come out the gate with a good show or go F yourself. I'm not saying that to her, by the way. I'm saying that to Disney. Disney has absolutely no excuse, in my view, to put out something this lackluster, this divisive to the fan base. This should have been on point. It should have been funny as F, and it should have been great. It should have been an hour long if you're going to include the origin story, quite frankly. Why not? They do that all the time for a first episode. And it's Disney Plus. They're not beholden to a network of time. Do you understand what Disney Plus is? It's a streaming service where they could show whatever length of TV show or movie they want. And they could fill in the rest with whatever the hell they want. They can do whatever they want. It's not like a network thing that had to be in an hour and then had to have commercials in certain spots. This is Disney Plus. They have absolutely no excuse for what they've done. To put out a half-hour episode with a movie star in it, and it gets mixed reviews. It's the second lowest rated thing on Disney Plus. With the Hulk in it, should have been number 1. Should have absolutely been number 1. Should have absolutely crushed Moon Knight and everything else on Disney Plus. Instead, it's just barely above Ms. Marvel. Assuming the numbers are even real, which I think the numbers are sus. So that's the long and short of it. Again, I'm not picking on this person. I think she's fine. I can't sit through a defense of She-Hulk. I think I'm done with She-Hulk. Please stop asking me to analyze She-Hulk. There's nothing else to say. I think the show sucks. I think Disney should be ashamed of putting out a show, any show, that doesn't immediately, blow the doors off of their audience because they have millions of dollars. If I had the kind of money Disney has access to, every show would be like The Mandalorian. You would watch it in awe. You would absolutely be awestruck by every single episode. You would watch that and go, my God, this is good. Because I would refine it. Because with that kind of money, you have the time to refine your story and your dialogue. So you don't get these lines like, oh, so I'm better than you? What? That's a line? That shouldn't be a line in this show. Unless it comes from a jerk, not your main character. The line from the main character should have been something like, Bruce, we're cousins and we're family. And we'll always stick together. That's a line that people can get behind. They go, oh, that's nice. That's nice. They're cousins. They're related in the MCU. We haven't seen that before. So, please, don't ask me to talk about She-Hulk anymore.